Thank you very much.
You're also very modest because you're like you triple axel Olympics, like girl, you've done a lot.
So today we are talking about Asians in figure skating, and we are joined by 4 individuals who exude excellence on and off of the ice. We are joined by Michelle Hong, Mirai Nagasu, Patrick Chan, and Tina Chen.
Woo!
Thank you guys. Thank you everyone for joining us today to have this discussion. So let's start off with who you are, where did you grow up, how did you get into figure skating, your skating achievements, and what are you doing now with regards to skating or outside of skating? So let's start with you, Michelle.
Hi everyone, my name is Michelle Hong. I am a coach and choreographer out of the Bay Area. And I started figure skating when I was about 5 years old. That's when I first stepped foot on the ice, but I didn't get involved with the sport heavily until I was 7 or 8. And I was attracted to the sport mainly because I was drawn to copying my sister. My older sister, Melissa, was the one that was really intrigued by the sport. When we first stepped foot on the ice, that first time at a birthday party, she was the girl that had the rental skates on, and then she copied everything that everybody else was doing. And I was the kid with the pads, the helmet, the elbow pads, clinching to the wall. And so it was totally a different experience for her as it was in comparison to me. But I gravitated towards her passion and her desire to want to learn. But one of the things that was really difficult for her was the discouragement of starting quote unquote late. And at that time, she started getting involved with the sport around 11 or 12 when she was begging my parents to put her in private lessons. And then they, funnily enough, also incorporated me into that picture because I was the right age, quote unquote. And so now what I'm doing is I really want to make a change in the sport to make it more inclusive so we don't feel these words of when is the right age, when is not the right age, ageism, and also be inclusive of different body types, backgrounds, and abilities. And so I do that through my coaching platforms on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. I share tips and tutorials that really help push the accessibility of figure skating. And so that is one of the biggest goals that I have. And I've been able to see so many people around the world who have never even thought about figure skating really get involved, whether it be through discussion or getting a pair of roller skates. So that's been very, very eye-opening and beautiful to see.
Yeah, your platform is amazing. I don't know how you do it because every day you're posting like 3-4 videos. I'm like, girl, how do you have time for this? And you're killing it, honey.
Thank you, Acacia.
Patrick, tell us about yourself.
Hi, I'm Patrick. I am a Canadian figure skater, and I started skating at the age of 5. I grew up, I'm a first-generation Chinese Canadian. Both my parents immigrated from Hong Kong, and being avid athletes themselves, they put me in several sports, one of them being figure skating, and then just went along with it. I actually wanted to play hockey and was put in figure skating lessons, the Can Skate program at the time, to learn the proper skating skills. And then the rest was kind of history. And I've had a very successful career, but now I'm looking at the future and can't skate forever, can't compete forever. So the transition part of finding the next career path has been a challenge, especially during a pandemic. Typically, I would be on tour, doing Stars on Ice in Canada or in Japan, and those were canceled. And it's been almost 2 years now. So it kind of sped up the process of finding another career path. So I'm teaching a bit of hockey, staying involved in skating. I love hockey. I love playing it. I love watching it. So to be involved in a small way is really cool. And then dabbling in some real estate as well. But yeah, so we'll see how things unfold.
I love how you just said, I'm a Canadian figure skater.
I know.
Like, you're not the figure skater.
The figure skater of Canada.
I love that. And you were just on Mighty Ducks. I just saw that. That's pretty cool.
Amazing.
Yeah. I was so lucky to be a stunt double for Kenny Wu. And I think there's no better like match because he's supposed to be an Olympic figure skater. So it's like perfect. I went on and kind of winged it, did a butterfly, did an axel in my hockey skates. And it was so much fun to meet kind of Emilio Estevez was there. So it was so cool to meet him. So cool. Oh my God, it was so cool. What a really humble guy. All the original Mighty Ducks were really nice. And I'm so blessed to have that opportunity.
That's like a quack, quack, quack.
Yeah.
I watch that movie like all the time.
Yeah.
Tina, tell us who you are and your work.
Hi, I'm Tina Chen, and I'm coming here, joining from Winnipeg, which is Treaty 1 territory, the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dene, and Dakota people, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. But this isn't where I grew up. I grew up in Edmonton, so I can't really remember how old I was when I started skating. My guess is probably 6 or 7. My mom signed me and my sister and brother up for all the various lessons that one was supposed to take, and skating was one of those. So, and a little bit like Michelle's story, my sister is about 1.5 years older than me. So we went through, I think I'm the one who wanted to stay in the skating longer than her, but we both spent our kind of childhood skating. I kind of come and go from the skating community at various times. So I was, not the level of competitor as everybody else on this panel. But I skated through the 1980s in Alberta, and I was a pair skater and an ice dancer and singles. And then I went to U of T for an undergrad, and I got to skate on the varsity team there, which is actually quite different and was a really great experience, kind of a whole different way of skating. And then I moved down to the States. So I lived in Wisconsin for a number of years while I did a master's and PhD, and I coached there because turns out it's a much better way to support your grad school than depending simply on scholarships and academics. That doesn't pay nearly as well as coaching kids. And so that was a great experience. And then I moved up to Winnipeg when I got a job here. So I currently teach at the University of Manitoba in the history department, and I work in areas of race and representation and questions of kind of social justice, both within Asia, but globally in global context. So that's kind of the things that preoccupy me all the time. And I work a lot on questions of media and the way that media represents people. So it's brought me back around, and I have 2 kids. And so when they started skating, it brought me full back into the world of skating. And so I coach here in Winnipeg. I talked to a lot of people in the last year. It's been fantastic seeing these conversations around race and how the skating community might talk about more than just what we do on the ice. And so just so excited to be joining this group and thinking with everyone.
I'm going to need to get some tips from you on how to juggle all of that, because you're a professor, you're grading report cards, whatever, and teaching and raising kids. I don't know how you're doing it, girl. That's amazing.
You might have to ask my kids whether I've been successful or not. They might have a different idea.
Mirai, tell us about yourself.
My name is Mirai Nagasu, and I, like Michelle, am from California, but on the southern end of the spectrum, Southern California. And I got into skating at a very young age. Like most kids, I put my first pair of skates on when I was 5 years old. And kind of like Patrick, it just kept snowballing. And actually, I have very Asian parents, and I do get very confused on like the generations. And so in Japanese, I'm considered second generation, so Nisei, because my parents are first generation coming from Japan and being the immigrants. But they, like most other parents, came over for the American dream, and they kind of wanted to put a taste of Japan in the US and started a restaurant. And for the longest time, I was so dedicated to Michelle Kwan because her parents also owned a restaurant. And so I would tell my parents constantly that I was really good at skating, even though I always placed 4th place. And I think I had this innate belief in myself, while my parents would kind of laugh at me and be like, okay, ha ha ha. But like, this is teaching you great life lessons, like work hard, put your work to the test, see where you rank up, and then like go back and train. And then all of a sudden it was on a national level, then an Olympic level. And all the while, I like to think that I was representing the Asian American community, but I think that when I was competing, I was so young that that kind of thing kind of went right over my head. It was always in the back of my mind, but it hasn't been until like 2021 when it's been so in my face. And even at the 2018 Olympics, when a lot of the interviews were about my ethnicity, I think that was the biggest reality check, in that I realized that being loud and proud and saying that, you know, historically speaking, skating hasn't always been a place that has been inclusive. And so I have been so fortunate to grow up in California, where diversity is abundant and a given. And oh, I'm kind of rambling, but in the hopes that I can push for diversity and inclusivity, especially with February being like Black History Month, I learned about Mabel Fairbanks and how the people that Mabel Fairbanks touched were the coaches who were at my rink. And that was why my rink was so diverse. And so I think that stepping out of California, as skating allows us to do, and now as a retired athlete, figuring out my way as a coach and choreographer, and also, you know, relating to the rest of you, and that like skating is my passion, but also trying to figure out what else I can pivot into. Lots to go into, but I think overall our passion and our relatability lies in our skating. And so, you know, I think that if we can push for more diversity and inclusivity and make skating more affordable, that would be great for all of us. And so, Asher, take it away.
Well, thank you very much.
You're also very modest because you're like, you triple axel Olympics, like, girl, you've done a lot.
Thank you. Thank you. I did land the triple axel at the Olympic Games, but I haven't landed it really on my own since then. I think I really pushed my body, as athletes all do, to achieve that Olympic dream. And so after I landed the triple axel and helped Team USA bring home a bronze medal, I really had to take a step back and take care of my body. I don't think people really realize how much we put our body in through, and like landing only on one side, your body really takes a beating that you feel way later. And so I've had to get another 2 hip surgeries now, and I know I feel a little young for the hip surgeries, but next to Lindsey Vonn and Tiger Woods, I feel like my surgery count is pretty low. So I feel blessed that, you know, I'm even able to jump now.
Good. And even Taylor Lipinski, didn't she have hip replacements as well?
She actually had surgery at the Stedman Clinic, which is where Dr. Philippon did my first hip surgery. And so I think that it's an unknown that, and Michelle Kwan as well, you know, skaters have so many hip injuries because it's just like we're pushed to, and that's where my confidence comes from, is that repetition of doing the jumps over and over again, so that I know when I have butterflies, what I know that when I'm like a little high in my knees, that I can say, okay, like mathematically speaking, when I'm at home, I can do 80% of these triples. So like, I need to calm down and pull it out of myself when I'm a little bit nervous. But there just isn't a lot of data on how many is too many, but data is so important. But like the sharing of information, like how many is too many, is just like, it's different for everybody, and all of our bodies are so different. And so like, it's just hard to kind of put it all into place. But if some software engineer can just make an app for us, and then we're like open to sharing that information, I think it will do wonders for skaters in the future.
Well, we definitely will be talking about the body eventually in this discussion, but Tina kind of touched on this, and all of you kind of touched on this, and I like to play this game, especially as a Black figure skater. what do people say to you when you tell them that you are a figure skater? And I'm going to start off with you, Tina. Yeah, what do they say to you, especially back then when, you know, Asian representation in the sport was almost nil?
You mean like back when the dinosaurs were still in Alberta and I was skating? That's what you mean? So I was, I'm not sure what people said to me then. I think, like, you know, as a young kid, the idea that you skated, people all skated. So, you know, there wasn't much to it. But I have to say the ones that always stick with me and that make me think about like the way that race operates is when I stopped skating and, you know, and I moved to different places. So when I was first in Toronto and I would say things to people like, oh, well, I used to skate, and then when I moved to Wisconsin, I'd say I used to skate. People go, what's your name again? And this is actually around non-skaters. So especially when I got into grad school, they go, what's your name? And I go, oh, Tina Chen. And they go, oh, I've seen you on TV. And I'd be like, no, you haven't. Like in my day, only like Worlds and Olympics were on TV. I'm like, there's no YouTube. There's no like finding every local competition. I'm like, I certainly was not on TV. And they'd be like, yeah, no, I've seen you. And I'd be like, no, that's not me. And so like after a while, I realized if I was in the Canadian context, they probably thought it was Charlene Wong, maybe they saw on TV, or in the US context, Tiffany Chen. And so it strikes me all the time. So the idea that people, they would just keep repeating, oh no, I've seen you. So it wouldn't matter how many times I'd say, you definitely have not seen me on TV. And I think I realized at the end that I was like, I guess Tiffany Chen, Tina Chen, same name. We all start looking the same. So but it always kind of reflects on me that there was a kind of sense of, well, of course, you know, one Asian skater is all Asian skaters at that moment. And I think, you know, so it wasn't so much about, you know, what people said to me about being a skater, but the idea that, you know, the refusal to like what I would say, you really haven't seen me on TV, I can guarantee it. And people would just refute that. So anyway, so maybe you've seen me on TV.
Well, technically, this is like almost like a TV, so I have. Patrick.
Yeah, I mean, one that pops up into my mind is like, oh, are you like a skateboarder? When I say I'm a skater, they're like, oh, you're a skateboarder. I was like, no, I'm like figure skater, like on ice. And yeah, my experience, you know, I've always had luckily in Canada and in school, in high school, I was always very well supported. And I had, you know, figure skating isn't the most mainstream, most popular sport. And I was traveling all the time and I wasn't around very often. So it really shaped my life really early on, and who I spent time with. And it almost, you know, I kind of felt maybe a bit disconnected with my community and my heritage and my culture, because I was always around white European influence, especially in figure skating. It's you forget how much influence it has from Europe, and I've had a very great community though here back in Canada, through school supporting me, and I never really I didn't have a terrible experience in terms of you know, maybe I remember people asking, do you know Michelle Kwan? And it's like, no, not really. It's a bit of a different era, and yeah.
Well, Michelle knows Michelle Kwan now. So let's go to you, Michelle. What do people usually say to you when you tell them you're a figure skater?
So when people first hear that I'm a figure skater, the first thing is, you're Michelle Kwan. And it's funny because I think it's very similar to Tina, where you only have one person of representation on TV, but they're meant to, in a way, represent all of us, which is beautiful because it makes us feel seen, heard. And Michelle made me feel like I can achieve that level of success. But when you hear things like, you're Michelle Kwan, it's like, in a way, it's like, ooh, like you think that I'm Michelle Kwan? Like, no, but thanks for the compliment. But it also, I was talking about this with Michelle yesterday because we did an interview on US Figure Skating's IG Live. And it was just so beautiful to be able to share that experience with her and tell her that you made me feel like I can do whatever I wanted to put my mind to. But at the same time as well, there was this level of pressure and this disconnect where it was amazing to see someone that looked like me on TV. But there was also this level of unattainability as well, because I didn't really get to hear her story, her struggle. And I felt like for myself, even though I was Asian, my experience was so vastly different than other Asians around me, specifically in where I grew up. So in Fremont, a lot of Asian Americans predominantly lived in, the wealthy area, and they came to America maybe for different reasons. Maybe they were sponsored by the US to be engineers, and their families had that history of already having an education background. So then coming here, they have an advantage in that way. But that's not the experience for everyone. And I think that is a huge stereotype within our space and in our community, that Asians are on the top, they're economically well off, and that's that for across the board. So in a way, it's like Michelle Kwan's like that too. It's like, Michelle Kwan exists in figure skating, and that means all Asians are great at figure skating. And so it diminishes every single other experience out there. And it plays into the model minority monolith in which each individual story gets lost. And so for my family, we're Cambodian American, and my family survived the Khmer Rouge genocide. And thinking about that, the severity of their history has not been spoken about. It's like a paragraph in our world history books. And so when I think about what my parents went through and how our people, 2 million of our people, were mass murdered, and our culture was at the brink of extinction, to be here in the US and to be able to say I'm a proud Cambodian American, that means so much to not just myself, but to my whole entire Cambodian community. And it's interesting that I didn't connect with that side of myself until very recently, very similarly to Mirai. And I think it's because we're so conditioned to play into, in a way, the model minority myth. Like, like all Asians are successful, I have to be successful. Michelle Kwan's at the Olympic level, I need to be at the Olympic level. And so we, in a way, start to lose ourselves because everybody else is creating a narrative for us, and we don't get to speak, and we don't get to vocalize our struggles, and we don't get to feel like we have our own stories. And there's many layers to that too, because it's also conditioning, cultural conditioning. And specifically for my family, it's kind of like, put your head down, keep on going, have your work speak for itself. And what is there to complain about when our family, survived a genocide, a war zone country? So here, coming to America, it's just, you have all the opportunity in the world. So just keep on going and be appreciative. So there's many layers to it, but that's kind of what I pull. It's very deep, just from a simple question of what do people say when they find out that you're a figure skater? I think there's many layers to it that I haven't really exposed myself to until very recently. And so I thank everyone for this conversation today.
Well, we are definitely going to get to those layers and peel back all of that onion. So I want to next go to, like we've kind of said before, it wasn't too long ago that Asian people, or especially East Asian people in figure skating in Canada, America, and worldwide, weren't super visible. The landscape has almost recently changed with like Yao Bin being the father of Chinese pair, creating Pang and Tong, Chen and Zhao, the first Chinese pair team to win worlds in the Olympics, Nettie Kim here in Canada, Michelle Kwan, like you guys said, Xing Li, Yuna Kim, Mirai Nagasu, Patrick Chan. So how, with the lack of a better word, this like kind of explosion of Asians in figure skating affects you as like a child, an athlete, a coach, when you see people who look like you driving the excellence in the sport? And we're going to start off with you, Mirai.
Oh my gosh. I related to a lot of what everyone on this panel were saying. And I want to add that I think that not just with our race, But I think that for companies as well, it's been difficult. I think that we all want a place in this world. And so we want to work for companies who have a culture that represents us. And so companies try to create those communities. But I actually am part of EY's Women Athletes in Business Networking program. And I talk with my mentor, Deborah, who is a senior partner at EY, about how to kind of handle all of the issues that are happening in 2021. And she says that it has been so beyond difficult for their company to create a group that kind of encompasses a place for Asian Americans, because, our generation is very comfortable, and I love that we're able to voice our opinions and talk about the things we've gone through. But for people who are of my parents' generation, it's just like it's not part of how they were raised. Like, they were raised to take the mistreatments and kind of just like keep their head down and keep going and not make waves. And so I think that I really love that our generation is like, stop making excuses. When we watch these movies and like the role is for an Asian person and we're seeing a white person, like, it does bother us. And so like, to see that little by little we're peeling away, racism. And although we are kind of taking a step back, to be able to have these conversations and to even be able to talk about it. And I think that as athletes, I so appreciate what Michelle Kwan and Christy Yamaguchi have done for the skating community, especially in North America, because, figure skating is traditionally a privileged sport and it's very difficult to access. But because I had role models like Christy and Michelle, and they were breaking down barriers, and they were saying like, there is a place for Asians to go into sport. Like, you don't just have to be a lawyer or doctor. Like, they did that for me, and like, it gave me the opportunity to dream, whereas I never considered a career in acting, because like, why would I have bothered when I, like, traditionally speaking, wouldn't turn the TV on and see people who look like me. And so I respect that this generation is like, please tell our stories. We are, we have different cultures even within the Asian American community, and they're worth talking about, and they're interesting, and, there's room for this diversity and inclusivity. And I think that just talking about it, like, going back to what is it like to be a figure skater? Like, a lot of times people would ask me if I was the one who skated with my brother, and I would be like, no, that's not me, and be a little uncomfortable about it. But like, at the same time, be like, okay, like, we are both Japanese American. It's easy to make that assumption, but like, overall, like, if they gave me a chance to speak about myself, I would be like, actually, like, I went to the Olympics as well. And like, I think that assuming is the issue. And I think that I hope that as we continue to voice our opinions, someone who might have the wrong assumption will take the opportunity to say like, okay, that was a great conversation to listen to, and this is how we can be allies. And like, I hope that, like, I think about how I got into skating, and it was my parents who got me into skating, because, as you mentioned, in Japan, skating is so well appreciated. And I used to love going to Japan because I was treated like a rock star, and like, that acknowledgement and that appreciation kept me going. Whereas, that wasn't always there in the US. And oftentimes it was like, oh, like, like, well, you don't win consistently, so like, it's hard to promote you because you just need the titles. But at the same time, like, we do live in a society where 96% of broadcasting goes to the men, and then of that sponsorship money, only 0.04% goes to women. So like to also learn that my skin color also might affect my chances. That has been really hard to, wrap my head around. And so I think that with social media, the power of social media and connectivity, I look at skating and I'm like, we need to help these young athletes understand the power of social media and help them get these teams that will help boost their platform so that they don't always like, there's room for, like Michelle said, the stories of the people who, aren't just Michelle Kwan. Like, I love that, like, we are a generation of vulnerability, and I relate to people. Like, it wasn't until my friends shared their mental health issues that I was like, oh my God, is that what I'm going through? And they helped me process what I was going through and like help me get the resources I needed. And a lot of times it's on social media. So I'm going to stop talking because that was very divergent, but I think that's the general gist of it.
You're speaking some powerful things, Mirai. So
thank you.
Patrick, can you say your experiences?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up watching, Kurt Browning, Brian Orster, Elvis Stoico. Canada has a lot of success in its history in figure skating. But I've never seen, growing up, I never saw a Chinese Canadian get to the very top internationally. And I almost, I maybe don't necessarily look full Chinese, and people would ask, are your parents mixed? Are you like, what's your background? And I felt almost shame of like saying, oh no, my parents are both Chinese. I'm full Chinese. And I almost wanted to become more white, and I wanted to assume this identity of kind of suppressing my Chinese heritage, my culture, my language. I don't speak as much Cantonese anymore because I didn't connect with my community, the Cantonese community. And so I realized this much later on, more recently, of just like, wow, it breaks my heart because my mom had sacrificed, my parents sacrificed so much so that I could chase my dream of being an elite figure skater. And I almost was ashamed of it and ashamed of the way my parents pushed me. And, oh, your mom is so strict because she's, a tiger mom. And it's like, I bought into it at such a young age. Of course you would, because you're still in development. Your brain is still developing. Figure skating is notoriously a very young sport. So you take a vulnerable group of kids and throw them into these situations where there's not representation. There's no one to look up to. There's not a mentor that I connected with. When I was on the national team or on the junior national team, there was nobody to ask these questions of like, what is it like stepping into a very white dominated sport as a Chinese figure skater? And yes, there was Chen Jingli. I remember that's the only guy I can remember. And I remember on TV watching and the commentator saying, Chen Jingli, yeah, he's can do the quad, but he lacks in artistry and lacks in spins and other transitions, the nuances of figure skating. So in my head, I already have that image of me being a more technically confident skater than I am an artistic skater. But the irony is that I actually was the other way around. I think I felt more comfortable skating and performing and really connecting to the music. So it was challenging for sure. And the message here is you don't know until you take a step back away from the sport and you look at the whole picture, and then you're like, whoa, I had suppressed a lot of my pride, my parents' pride, and where they come from and where I come from, which is unfortunate because I hope now it changes. I hope now we're moving in a direction where myself, I've hopefully inspired many other Asian Americans, Asian Canadians to take up the sport and have someone to look up to.
If you really love this episode, please tune in next week for part 2.
FSDIA's Conversations in Color is recorded and edited in Toronto and Pickering, Ontario, Canada, on the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee, Mississauga of Scugog, Wendat, Huron-Wendat, and the Mississauga of the Credit.
Thank you so much for tuning into FSDIA's Conversations in Color. Please subscribe to our channel. Find us on the gram at Figure Skating DIA, on Facebook at the Figure Skating Diversity and Inclusion Alliance, and our website at fsdia.org. And remember to color your